Hey, the company Mecpow sent me the Mecpow X3 Pro laser engraver. It's a 10-watt diode laser engraver. And well, instead of giving you a review as a guy who knows absolutely nothing about laser engravers, I thought I'd share with you my experience of how I utilized my laser engraver for the first time and actually made a tumbler. Well, I didn't make a tumbler, I engraved a tumbler. Let's check it out. Hey, so as we talk about this laser engraving experience today from roughly start to finish, I'm not giving a review, but more of my story and my experiences with this thing so that you can make an informed decision whether or not this will be something for you. And we're going to start off here today with the actual laser engraver itself. Mecpow did send me this, and I will make a video on how to do a build of this, a very detailed video. But for the meantime, what we need to know is it's a 10-watt laser, it's a diode laser, and it's 450 millimeters by 450 millimeters. On top of sending me the actual laser engraver, they send me this honeycomb workspace. And the honeycomb workspace is about 400 millimeters by 400 millimeter workspace. So you lose a little bit there. And then additionally, they send me an enclosure. And these are where my first issues did arise. Don't get me wrong, I was still able to eventually get everything engraved, but it sure took a long time because when I got the laser engraver, it was missing two belts that go on both sides of the actual engraver. And when I contacted Mecpow, they sent me the replacement belts, but they only sent me one replacement belt and I needed two. So I then had to wait more weeks. And as I was dealing with that, I did notice that the frame for the enclosure was also bent. And an enclosure is a great thing for a laser engraver, I'm learning, because if you want to laser engrave indoors, you need somewhere to essentially ventilate everything that's coming off of this laser, like paints and powder coating and smells. You want that to go out your window and not around your house. And if you're working with wood, all those fumes are a lot of smoke. I'm glad I didn't operate this indoors because that was my initial thought. As I build this indoors, I said, I'm just gonna use this on the dining room table. After all, it did sit there for about 2 months, a month and a half, while awaiting for the parts to arrive and then re-arrive from Mecpow. I did finally get them and I got this thing together. And to my surprise, I was able to print very quickly. And when I say print, my apologies, 3D printing, I was able to engrave fairly quickly. Some of my first engravings were on cutting boards because I have a lot of cutting boards laying around from my CNC mill. And I figured, hey, why not? So I made this, and yeah, I did notice it was a little bit dark. And I also made this, which says, grill, laugh, and sizzle. It's kind of like live, laugh, and love. And I think they both kind of turned out okay, although a little bit dark, which means I burned too much. Maybe there was too much power, or maybe I needed to adjust settings within Laser GRBL. And again, this is my first time, so I was still extremely happy with these results. And I continue to try to dial in my settings. I think that's the key that I learned about laser engraving is dialing in your settings could be very important. Such was the case with the next thing I engraved, which was more wood. Now the Mecpow X3 Pro is the 10-watt diode laser. That's the engraver they sent to me, and that's capable of engraving on multiple surfaces and cutting other surfaces as well. You can engrave on surfaces like wood board, bamboo, solid wood, leather, glass, ceramics, acrylic, stainless steel, anodized metal, fabric, and you can cut on such materials as 2 millimeter thick board, 3 millimeter thick board, 4 millimeter thick board, 7 millimeter thick board, cardboard, leather, and fabric. But each of those different things that you want to engrave on are going to require different settings within your software. We call it slicer software in 3D printing, but each of your different types of woods or materials are going to require different settings to get the engraving or the cutting correct. I did find the process fairly simple by reading the manual that you definitely couldn't tell I was reading from 2 minutes ago. But these settings should also not be taken for the word as true gospel, if you will, because these are just settings to get you in the general vicinity of where you need to be in order to do a proper engraving or cut. So with knowing I felt these were too dark, I kept playing around and kept making adjustments, and finally I decided that I was ready to cut my dog. That probably came out wrong. Laser engrave on my... I decided to use artificial intelligence to make a portrait representing my dog,
which I then laser engraved with the wood, and then I cut out with the laser engraver. I thought it turned out really well. I was happy, and I gave it to my neighbor because she loves my dog. She was pretty excited as well, I think. There is always room for improvement with laser engravers, with 3D printers, with anything we tinker with. And one of the things that I noticed was sometimes it was hard to align everything and to get what you would call the bottom left position or left alignment correct every time. I found this on Thingiverse, which I'll link below, and this allows me to continue to essentially left align everything. I then hit up two places that I love to hit up in town. Number one, Goodwill, because there's a lot of cheap stuff there that I could try to engrave and burn onto and maybe even cut. And then right next to Goodwill, I went to Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby has coasters for really cheap, and I could practice. And obviously this isn't centered. It's a graphic designer's nightmare, but realistically, it was helping me dial in all the settings like I had mentioned a moment ago. And so I purchased a bunch of wood from Hobby Lobby. I actually did go over to Home Depot and get some thin sheets of wood. They're a lot cheaper at Home Depot than they are at Hobby Lobby. As I would continue to test out different cuts of wood, whether it was engraving or cutting, one of the tools that really came in handy was definitely this right here, which is allowing you to help focus the laser diode onto the object that you're engraving onto. It's very simple. One of the things I noticed is when I was cutting things a lot smaller, I was getting some cuts where I didn't necessarily want cuts. And also I was getting burns on the edges. And this is telling me again to dial back my settings. Eventually I got to here, and even though this isn't perfect, I was happy with having my dog on a keychain for his go bag. My dog has a go bag. So why don't we just talk about the next step? And I really wanted to engrave on tumblers. And at first I decided to 3D print this, which I found on Calts.com, Calts3D.com. And yeah, this is great because it will hold your tumbler, but there's no motor on it to roll your tumbler, so this isn't gonna work. You need to have a rotary tool with a stepper motor. I ran out to Amazon.com and I purchased the Mecpow rotary engraver tool. I do want to point out that this laser engraver also, it has an emergency stop function, which is really useful. There is no remote capabilities to control this thing, so you have to plug into a USB-C that goes into a computer. Although I do wonder if there's something out there like Octoprint for 3D printers that allows you to remotely connect, monitor, and start a cut, if you will. But on top of the emergency stop, there's a reset switch, an on-off switch, and there's also a key so your kids don't mess with your lasers. Lasers can be dangerous. And that's why they give you these. Yeah. Now these glasses are great for being able to help you be able to work around your laser while the laser is going, because a laser could damage your eyes. And my one complaint about these glasses is if that laser hits a certain angle, I seem to get light into here, which is very concerning because I think that's kind of too close to my eyes. But otherwise, these seem to work okay. I'd probably caution you that if you're going to be working around lasers, you really do research into what a good pair of safety goggles and other safety equipment would be. When I finally got everything installed and configured, the risers on the laser engraver for the rotary tool, I got the rotary tool plugged into the Y-axis of the actual laser engraver. I went ahead and I used the recommended settings and I started trying to laser engrave things. And they didn't necessarily turn out great, but I will say that I was experimenting with settings, utilizing their settings. Eventually I realized I ruined a perfectly good tumbler or two or three. And that's when I realized I will use the tumbler to make little cuts and find the right settings for each tumbler, because I noticed that each tumbler is going to have its own settings based on whether or not it's powder coated, how thick the powder coating is. This is a tumbler I believe I started right here. And as I turn the laser assist on, you can see that there was quite a difference here. Can you see that? Here's a laser engraver. Yeah, it's kind of, there you go, right there. You can see now there's a light side and a dark side, and that switch right there, the only settings that were changed happened to do with me turning on or off the laser assist, or excuse me, the air assist.
In case you're wondering, the Mecpow X3 Pro that was sent to me included an air assist, and an air assist could do things like improve the cut quality, increase the efficiency of the laser, extend the life of the laser, enhance the safety of the laser by blowing away potential hazardous fumes, and reducing the risk of fire.
But eventually, after making fine adjustments within the settings and determining whether or not I wanted air assist, I did find out which settings would work right for each of the tumblers I wanted to use. And I don't want this to drag on, but I also do like talking, I guess. I finally decided on a logo that I wanted to make up and put on the tumbler. And the reason I used this logo that I'm about to show you is because it had very fine detail and it's a decent size shape. It's not too large or too small. Okay, right here you see I'm running laser GRBL. I have my image rotated 90 degrees, and that's because of how I have the actual tumbler laid out. The mouth of the tumbler is facing toward me, and that's why I rotated it the way I did. One of the things I want to make note of is I am hooked up with my USB here, which goes into the actual laser engraver. And again, I think it would be really nice in the future to be able to somehow monitor this remotely with a Raspberry Pi even, just so I can keep an eye on this if there's a problem. I did have problems initially connecting with the software, and the problems that I had were resolved. What it was is if I would try to connect to the laser engraver with the USB plugged in, it just wouldn't connect. I found out that this emergency stop switch over here, if it's enabled, meaning if it's pressed in, it won't even allow you to connect, therefore allowing you to be safe and exercise all safety precautions when that button's engaged. You don't want to be able to connect to it and hit print, or engrave rather, well, if there's an emergency stop or a reason for the emergency stop. So that was an easy solution. Once I disengaged that emergency stop button, I connected the software, everything went well. It's going to be 120 minutes now. I have a progress bar, and more importantly, I'm just kind of keeping an eye on the tumbler to see how it's doing. And to be honest, I actually did mess up. And I'll tell you what it was in just a second here, but we could test out that emergency stop button. It stopped. And also, I could just use the key to shut this off, and that's another way to prevent anything from occurring. But the issue that I had, I should probably make note of and show you, is I had this rotary tool that's down here, everything's aligned, and I forgot to plug the Y-axis wire back in. So yeah, that was my bad. Now that it's also engraving again, I should probably get some ventilation in here because that powder coating gets really stinky.
Just 1 hour, 20 minutes later, we're done, and it looks horrible. But I have a magic eraser here, and I'm hoping that with a little bit of, luck, it'll come right out. It is starting to come out, you can see here, and it's starting to look a lot better. So there is a little bit of maintenance work in here. Soap and water under a sink with hot water running will usually get the job done a little bit better. But if we could just take a moment there to really appreciate what it is. Hold on. Like I was saying, if we could take a moment just to appreciate what it actually is. I mean, the details on that are very fine, and they turned out so well. The laser cuts are nice. And yes, you could actually see some layer lines or some lines where the laser actually engraved, but they're not too horrible where it would make any kind of noticeable difference. Hey, thanks for watching the channel if you made it this far, or if you fast forward it, welcome. I want to start off by thanking Mecpow for sending me the X3 Pro with the air assist, the honeycomb table, and even the laser engraving enclosure. I know they send this to me for the purpose of a review and an evaluation, but how could I give you a review and an evaluation as a hobbyist who's just getting started in laser engraving? And that's why I decided to show you my experience. And I found that much like 3D printing, CNC mills, vinyl cutting, there's a lot of fine-tuning in settings and software in order to get the cut to look correct. When I first got started in 3D printing, I would read this article and this post, and people would say that all these printers are garbage and none of them work, and I still see that every day now. And my first thought is did you fine-tune your settings in slicer software, or for this case, did you fine-tune your laser GRBL settings? And I find that the answer many times is no. So the experience that you got to see was me working to fine-tune everything, and it's not perfect, by the way. There's always room for improvement. That's the fun and the joy of being a hobbyist. You get to learn all these things and continue to learn them, so the next time you see my dog cut out, it'll be even better quality. I hope you enjoyed this video, but more importantly, I hope it brought you joy, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.